Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? Alright, today's video. Someone's mowing the lawn out there, of course. I don't seem to record when people aren't mowing their lawn. I don't know why that is. But it causes some noise in this room here. Kind of annoying. That's also the topic of today's video. No, not noise in my room. Noise that parks make. We're having some trouble with that out there. So let's go over a couple instances and just talk about rides in parks making noise. Let's get into it.
Now get ready. Here we go.
All right, for those of you joining me for the first time, welcome. I hope you enjoyed this video and check out some of my other ones. I have plenty of them. All right, so today's video, we're talking about noise in amusement parks. Now, amusement parks are not quiet places for the most part. Some of them actually manage to do a pretty good job. The closer you get to a theme park and pull away from the amusement park and get towards a theme park, typically the quieter they are. For instance, where I used to work, we were an amusement park. It was one of those things. The park was actually nice and quiet. When rides were running in the morning time before people came in through the front gate, you could hear them running across the park. You could hear them running everywhere when mechanics were running them. But right before they opened the front gate so let people in, the park noise came up, the park music came up, and all the music came up in the park, and it became extremely loud to the point where it's like you had to raise your voice to talk with somebody. That's pretty loud. It's like average in most parks is hovering right around 84 to 86 decibels of sound, which is a lot. Now, most of us go in the morning time and you just get used to the amount of noise that the park is making, and it just becomes the baseline for the day. So you don't really realize it, how noisy in fact the park is. Well, in the news more recently, it's like Fast and the Furious over there in Hollywood, California, of course. They were opening up their Fast and the Furious ride, and then they had to shut it back down while they put in sound walls around the ride. Universal announced that the ride was too noisy for their neighbors. Now, you get a lot of enthusiasts jumping in there and saying, like, the neighbors live close to an amusement park. What did they think they were going to get? Hey, you got to remember, some of those neighbors have been there for a very long time. And Universal Park in California, especially, didn't make that much noise. So they have a lot of sound studios going on there. They have active recording happening. So one of the first things, actually, when they were going to put in the Fast and the Furious coaster, the first thing that they actually had to do was convince the movie portion of the lot, the lot that's at the bottom that's actually doing recording of movies and shows and everything else. They had to convince them that the sound from the amusement park wasn't going to get through the soundstage walls and get in there and mess up the recording, because none of the production companies wanted to lose time or anything else. So once they convinced them of that, then the shift turned a little bit and it said, well, what's going to happen to the outside? It's like, well, some of the sound is going to go outside, but it shouldn't be too bad. Well, fast forward, they're trying to open up Fast and the Furious, and neighbors all around the park are complaining.
30 years ago, you bought a house by a motion picture studio. And there was some amusement park involved with it, but the amusement park, part of it has gotten bigger and bigger over the years.
We can hear the park now. We can hear too much. Like occasionally you might be able to hear a little bit coming from like the Jurassic Park ride, but for the most part, all the rides at Universal are actually indoors. They're inside of buildings, which means the sound does not get out. So there's an engineering aspect that's happening there. So the sound does not leave the park. Fast and the Furious, the drift coaster, however, is the first coaster that Universal's installed in that particular park that is outside. Now, for those of you who don't know that park, there's houses actually really, really, really close to that park. What makes it worse is that the park is on the side of the hill, so you have two things going for you. One, sound bounces off to the hill and comes back out towards the residential areas. And two, Anyone that's up higher, you don't even have to bounce something off of it. The higher you are, the further your sound will go. Sound arcs out and comes down. So it's like a double whammy. It's like, yep, sound traveled right out there and it irritated the neighbors. The neighbors are like, we don't like it. Universal is doing their best to say we're going to create more sound walls, we're going to put up more stuff. I think they're past the point of enclosing the entire ride, although I wouldn't put it past them, but I think they're past that point of enclosing that ride completely to make the sound go away altogether. Don't think they're there. So I wanted to look at some of the other things. Well, what can the park do in general? Now, my experience is from the park point of view. It's not from the engineering point of view. Although I heard stuff, I've heard things about how this and that works that I can add into this. But I'm not really. My experience is not coming from engineering rides to be quiet. My experience is coming from trying to make rides quiet because of neighboring areas and things like that. So when you talk about rides in general, one of the first things that pops up, I'm a big Disney fan. I've gone to Disneyland a lot, grew up in California, went to Disneyland all the time. When they opened California Adventure up, there were things that I noticed right off the back. Their big white coaster out there, which at the time was called California Screamin', it's in Credit Coaster now. That coaster had big tunnels, big tubes sitting up on top of the lift hill, some of the drop and things like that. So that was my first question was, what are those tunnels for? I mean, don't get me wrong. I think all of us love tunnels. We love stuff like that. So I'm not really going to, like say it's a bad thing, but like, why is that there? And they said, oh, easy, because that park is directly next to the Anaheim Convention Center. That's next to businesses and everything else. The businesses did not want the noise of the theme park to get out and impede whatever is going on at those business centers. You got to remember, not everything is all Disney in that area. It's a big draw, sure, but there's still legitimate things happening outside the area, and businesses just don't want that noise. So Disney said, okay, you know what's going to happen is that we are going to enclose areas that get above our walls. The walls of the park basically are the first defense in trying to reflect the sound back into the park. So the sound in the park bounces back in off of the walls. All the speakers, everything else is pointed inward. They're not pointed at random things like up towards the walls, up to the sky and everywhere else. Amusement parks, theme parks mainly in general, spend a lot of time making sure that their speakers' sounds don't go other places that they're not supposed to be. They stay inside the park, focused at the area where they want them to. Disney's one of those unique cases. I'm sure Universal does the same thing. As you're walking along, the sound very rapidly will fade away from one area you're walking through and then turn into a different sound into the next area you're walking into. This is just sound control between areas. So the level of the sound is actually very low to do that because you can't do that with blaring music. You can't go to a Six Flags park and suddenly change that. If they do suddenly change between one area of the park or the other, you're going to hear both at the same time. It's going to sound like a headache in the making. Disney put up these big tubes up there to basically contain the sound into the park. Remember when the rides first opened, they were actually not a round tube. They were actually just kind of like a shell, half shell. And that was basically to take the sound and bounce it back into the park instead of letting it go outside. The second one, the Maliboomer that used to be there, was an SNS tower ride. The Maliboomer had these clear plexiglass covers in front of the restraints. Now, this video, you've guessed it already, but for the longest time, it was like, why is there a plexiglass cover, a clear cover in front of everybody's face on this restraint? Most of us at the time thought, well, are they trying to prevent like barf from coming out and going down on people, just keeping it all contained in one spot? Genuinely like head scratching. Like, what was that for? Well, same exact thing. When people scream on that ride, being up so high, close to the neighbors, that sound travels straight out. So Disney said, let's reflect the sound, and they put that plexiglass cover in front and it shot the sound straight up, which it can't really go out and over. It pretty much just goes up and dissipates and comes down into your lap and pretty much dissipates. Reflects a little bit, but not much because the restraint's there. So most of the sound from the Maliboomer was prevented from going out into the rest of the park and the neighboring areas, and it stayed quiet. Now, theme parks, you don't want sound to travel. Amusement parks, we are used to sound traveling. You're used to hearing that ride all over there. Show up to Great America, Six Flags Great America. What can you hear? It's like, ooh, you can hear Max Force unloading when that thing launches. And the air unloads from that thing, you can hear that boom across the park. It's like, that thing is loud, right? It does a lot of stuff like that. Theme parks are really good at keeping the sound in. It's also one of the reasons why most all of their rides are enclosed in the areas, because they don't want the sound bleeding out into other areas. They don't want to hear people screaming. They don't want to hear the sound from that ride. One of the interesting things that I've learned along there is the actual, like, when ride vehicles are designed for Disney especially, they have to pass an exacting sound criteria. They put this much energy into it. The sound has to stay in the vehicle essentially and not go out all over the place, but it also has to meet a certain sound quality inside the train. Can't sound like crap. So that was a very interesting thing. There was a lot of stuff said in that conversation. A lot of it went way over my head because I'm not a sound expert. I don't know about it, but just the engineering that goes into the sound internal inside of Disney's trains is pretty incredible from my understanding. That was some really interesting stuff I learned there. So it's way more than just adding speakers inside of a train and saying, look, we've got a sound system now. It's like, no, it's completely different than that. Now, sometimes parks actually use the sound of their rides to actually get out there and draw and entice people in. That is one of the things at fair rides. When you go to fairs, you can hear and see. That's why everything is flashing lights and loud sound, because they're trying to get people, they're trying to raise attention and say, hey, come see us, come see us. But most amusement parks do not want that sort of attention because that makes for unhappy neighbors. One of the things that was very interesting is it's a similar case. It's very similar to this. Is at California's Great America, where that park is living its last days out there. California's Great America, the Gold Striker, that roller coaster has basically the same thing California Screamin' had on it. It was a tunnel all over the thing. It's like, why is that? Well, California Great America, just like Disneyland and the Anaheim Convention Center, California's Great America is butted right up next to a bunch of businesses all along that one side of the park. Right where they built that wooden roller coaster, there's a bunch of office buildings basically all along that side of the park. So when that ride opened, those businesses complained like crazy that it was making too much noise. Now, this is a wooden roller coaster, which I kind of thought that was funny. It's like, just a little further. What direction is that? I believe that's a little further south from where that ride is. You've got the Grizzly sitting there, which is a wooden roller coaster. And I'm like, that's not making a lot of noise, but the brand new wooden roller coaster is making noise. Okay. So they went through all this. They put up the tunnels all around it. They did a lot of stuff to try to engineer the noise away from those buildings and keep it at least in the park. So they put tunnels, they put covers all over everything. And then they were still having trouble with it. So they found out that they're like, okay, when they really started talking with the businesses did not like those rides over there, or that new ride especially, because they said all the people in their building were watching that ride run all day. Again, I'm still sitting there like, you have other rides you can look at, but they're just focusing on the wooden roller coaster. Maybe it was a new roller coaster and that's the reason why they were all watching it. But that was one of the things. It was like, first they started with the noise, but it turns out the noise was not actually the problem. The problem was their workers were watching the ride run and spending all their time staring out the window watching the ride run instead of doing the work that they were supposed to be doing. But that caused a lot of headache on Great America's part because they had to deal with the fallout of that one. They had to cover the ride up and try to keep the noise down. There was not much they could do except for enclose more of the ride to try to keep the workers from watching the ride running, which is pretty crazy by itself. Manufacturers acknowledge that their rides can be noisy from time to time. So there are things like, one of the things that makes rides noisy is working components high up in the air. So for this, I've got a lot of experience with the SLC, suspended looping coaster made by Vekoma. A lot of roller coasters put their lift motor down at the bottom of the lift hill. It's easy to work on if you need a crane to pick the motor off. It's lower to the ground. There's a lot of stuff better with keeping that motor lower. But the Vekoma SLC puts its lift motor, gearbox, everything at the very, very top of the lift hill. So an unintended byproduct of that is that motor produces a lot of noise. It resonates on top of that structure and vibrates up there, and it produces a ton of noise that 140 feet up in the air can be heard all over the place. You can hear when that lift hill turns on and starts to pull a train up there. So Vekoma offers all sorts of things for a lot of their rides to quiet them down. For the SLC, they offer basically this heavy-duty enclosure that goes all the way around the lift motor, gearbox, and everything else. And it's just designed to deaden the noise from that lift motor and keep it in that one spot, lowering the external decibels that go out around the surrounding areas. Vekoma also, for their boomerangs are really loud. If you've been around a boomerang, they make a lot of noise. So for boomerang, they make all sorts of silencing things for that thing. The power package that sits down there that the hydraulic unit is contained in, that power package has a silencing kit that you could put around it that basically muffles all the in and out. It baffles the airflow in and out of it to keep it quiet. There is silencing stuff that you could put on lift 2. And basically, if you're around a classic boomerang, when that train goes up on lift 2, you can hear that chain dog ratchet as it goes up there. Train goes up the lift, and you'll hear it go, and then it lands on the lift. Now, you can't do much about the landing on the lift, but they built a silencing kit for the chain dog part. It's actually a cover that goes on the bottom part of the trough. And it goes up and the chain dog hits it and is lifted up, and it just slides over that cover right up until the area where about the train lands. So you'll hear just a little clunk clunk as it hits that cover, and it goes all the way up to the top, and then you'll just hear it go, and then it drops in, lands. It still makes a lot of noise when it lands, but it severely lessens the noise coming off of lift 2. Also, when lift 2 and that entire trough drops down, OEM, they put big rubber bushings up there. Makes a lot of noise when that trough finally falls. Is undercharged or about to rupture. And hits the bottom, makes a lot of noise. So they put Indyne shock dampeners up there as an upgrade to keep that noise down. So the Indyne shocks acts more as a catch instead of a bumper. So it takes that load and slows it down really quick. And the noise is more minimal. But again, like I said, boomerangs, they're kind of noisy to start with. Our boomerang, we had this weird thing where it's like we could not run the boomerang too late at night, because when we ran the ride late at night, we would have neighbors from all over complain about the noise. Now, for a lot of people watching, you say like, well, that seems really superficial to complain about if maintenance needs to run the ride at nighttime. It would be one thing if maintenance was running the ride at nighttime just to say like, oh, I'm just doing my final operation. I'm going to run my 2 cycles on the ride or 3 cycles on the ride, and then I'm done for the night. Typically not what we're talking about, though. When maintenance has to run a ride, maintenance is running the ride because there's generally a problem with it. So when maintenance has to run a ride at nighttime, it's not 1 or 2 cycles. Generally, it's like 10, 15, 20, 30 cycles at nighttime. because we're putting time onto a repair or a fix that we did. We did a bunch of stuff, we changed the sensor, and we want to see if it works now. So it's not just one cycle and like, yeah, it works, open the ride back up. It's like, no. We want to put in the turnover that we ran 30 cycles on it with no more faults. So everyone's like, yep, the ride seems to be fixed now. We're good to open it up the next day. So that's what people are complaining about when you say like, oh, we're going to run the boomerang at 1 o'clock in the morning. All the neighbors hear that boomerang running loud and clear, not just once, but for like 30 cycles at 1 o'clock in the morning. So we were just like, okay, we're not going to run the boomerang past about, I think it said we kind of put a line in the sand about 11 o'clock. So when 11 o'clock comes around, that's done. We're not running anymore. Sometimes the manufacturer offers an upgrade in the wheels. So a lot of rides use nylon wheels. Nylon wheels are great for friction. They're really bad for flat spotting because once nylon wheels start to flat spot, they just continue to turn into like basically a hexagon and eventually they just completely fall apart. But nylon wheels make a lot of noise. I've heard a lot of people say this, that they always talked about, they said, oh, the B&M roar. I'm sure a lot of you just perked up. The B&M roar. Well, what you're hearing is all the nylon wheels on a lot of the B&M rides. A lot of parks want to run their B&M fast. So the road wheels are nylon. They put nylon wheels on there all over the place. So the train runs really fast. Now, a lot of places do that. Sure, there's no problem with that whatsoever. What does nylon do on steel? It makes a ton of noise, just an ungodly amount of noise. That noise is the B&M roar. You're hearing nylon wheels on a steel track. That is the B&M roar. What's the upgrade for that? Well, you can use like these wheels right here. You can use polyurethane wheels. Okay, they still do their job. They still keep the train moving, but they're very quiet as they're out there running around the track. Not dead silent, but they're way quieter than any sort of nylon wheel is. So polyurethane rubber wheels are basically an upgrade sometimes to quiet the train down. Does that come at a price? Yes, it does. It takes that speed away, and those nylon wheels eat up a lot of energy on the train. So if the train's already moving slow and you run a risk of valleying a train with all nylon wheels on it, you're pretty much stuck with nylon wheels, because if you put urethane wheels on there, it's going to valley almost every single time. But a lot of parks also set up their rides as they, okay, we're going to use a combination of wheels. We're going to use mainly rubber wheels or polyurethane wheels with just a handful of nylons to keep it moving a little quicker. That's something that the parks can do. Now, when it comes to rides running, they make a lot of noise doing standard things. What do we all like to hear on rides? A lot of us like to hear the click of the anti-rollback as it goes up the lift. That click, 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 bang, 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 whatever the lift makes. A lot of us like to hear that. What is that sound? That sound is steel on steel contact. What does that do? That wears the anti-rollback dog down, both physically and then it can mushroom back out. So you have to grind it back into profile or just replace the thing. That also does the same thing to the toothed rail that sits on the lift hill. That toothed rail on the lift hill will also get worn down and mushroomed out. That's much harder to replace than the dogs are. So one of the things we do to silence those is the manufacturer has put rubber pads on those things So when they go up, you could still hear them, but it sounds more like a thump instead of a bang. Some of them are quiet altogether. A lot of newer rides use magnetic or suppressive wheels to hold the anti-rollbacks up and out of the way so they don't even touch at all. So that's one thing that you can do to make them quieter. I know there's a lot of rides out there that offer an upgrade package. It's a lift silencing package for their anti-rollbacks that keep the dogs up. The Gerschlauer we had, it used this little tiny L cam on the side of the thing, and basically it ran along this rail right next to the teeth, and it held the anti-rollback up the entire time. And then as soon as that thing tried to go backwards, that cam would simply fall down and the dog would go back down and bite into the teeth. It worked really great. It was a good thing. I liked it. Kept the lift nice and quiet. Some lifts will use a tire, literally with a little magnetic drive to hold the thing up. There's all sorts of things you can do out there. X2, Magic Mountain. When they were working with that one, the engineers were trying to silence that lift down even more because that thing was putting out a lot of decibels. So they were testing all sorts of different rubber compounds, something that would hold up on that lift, because if you know the size of that ride, it's massive, absolutely massive. So they were putting all sorts of different materials underneath there, trying to figure out what would not only quiet it down really good, but what would hold up. They had built a anti-rollback tester in the back of the park. It was a giant wheel with pipes welded onto it to simulate the anti-rollback teeth on X2. And they said when they spun that thing up to speed to test the anti-rollbacks, because they didn't want to test it on the ride, they wanted to test the material in a controlled environment. They said, oh man, you could hear that thing for miles when that was up and running. That must have been a sight and a sound for sure. Also, Magic Mountain, Superman the Escape from Krypton. Remember that ride? Yeah, most of us do. The Escape from Krypton, that thing underneath there, I had to, this one was a Google, but when I saw it, I was like, yeah, that seems about right. When it would hit that curve at the end and pull up, reports say 110 decibels of noise out there. Now, that one, there's not much they could do. That was the design of the ride. That was how it worked. That was what you get for, I think it was 8. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, so 8 steel wheels crushed against a vertical steel rail. I mean, all that stuff was just vibrating like crazy. Not to mention the wheels didn't turn with the rail, causing extra noise on top of that. But yeah, 110 decibels. And that's why when I Googled that, I'm like, was there a decibel rating? And it said, came back with 110. And thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. That sounded like pretty much a fighter jet coming over every time that train went up and over there. Now, these things are very minor. They're just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure in the comments down there, people will fire off with plenty of like, they had to do this to this ride. I mean, there is tons of stuff parks have to do to quiet rides down. And each one is kind of unique. It's not a very like, oh, we're just going to do this one thing and it will apply to everything. Not so much. Every ride is unique. Sometimes just remounting fiberglass onto the train, the big fiberglass covers that make the train look the way it does. Sometimes simply just refixing those will take noise away from a train. There's all sorts of things you can do. Catwalks, things you walk on around there, lift platforms, access walkways and things like that. All that stuff also vibrates. So we've done stuff in the past where we've gone up there and taken kind of like an RTV, just like a silicone basically in a caulking tube, and basically went up there and then ran silicone all over the stuff next to there. So it wasn't just a metal on metal contact. It was actually kind of glued together at that point. So it didn't vibrate as much, less rattle, less noise. Yeah. No one really likes a ton of noise in the park. The Larson loops, the big loop, the giant Larson loops that are out there, Although those numbers have pretty much dwindled. Yeah, the best thing you could do for those is to remove them completely. Those things had a lot of decibels. I never liked working on those because you stand right next to them and you could not hear yourself think. Old linear induction rides, the same way. They scream so loud. And that scream is not coming from the people, that's coming from the linear inductive motors in the track. That's where the scream comes from on those rides. But again, there's nothing you could do about that because that is just a function of the ride. Unless you wanted to convert the whole thing to LSM. Then they get a lot quieter from there. All right, I think I was going to do it for this video. Like, subscribe, comment, share, do all that stuff downstairs. It does help me out. I can't wait to see what other people put in the comments down there about all the things that parks do to quiet rides down, because I know everyone's probably got a handful of examples keyed up, ready to go. These videos are a great source of information. I will find myself looking through the comments. I mean, I read everyone's comments, but I find myself looking through the comments to just like what people put up for some parks. Hey, did you know this park did this and they did that and they did? And I'm just sitting there like, wow, really? They did that? Oh, that's crazy. Also, take the comments sometimes with a grain of salt. Not everyone's truthful on these things, but that's perfectly, I mean, it is what it is. All right. I'm Ryan the Ride Mechanic. Stay off the air gates. Bye.